I just gotta say, the book was better, and I haven't even read the book. The other day, I got to watch The Housemaid, and I'm gonna be honest, I was forced into watching this movie. I was handcuffed, and I was thrown into the basement, and the only way I could leave is if I watched The Housemaid with my girlfriend. So yeah, I had no choice watching this. I'm kidding. Jokes aside, I was interested in seeing this movie. It looked pretty interesting. I didn't really realize that I've actually seen Sydney Sweeney before, and that was in Madam Web. And viewers of my channel will know how I feel about that movie. Spoiler alert, it's the worst movie that came out last year. So yeah, you know, it's just a new year. It's a new Sydney Sweeney. You know, there's also Amanda Seyfried, as well as Brennan Skylander, I believe, Michelle Monroe, Indiana Ellie. There's really not that many other characters in this movie that's important or really worth mentioning. Directed by Paul Feig, or Feig, I believe it's pronounced, and published by the oh-so-cool guys over there at Lionsgate. God, they're so cool. Did I mention they're so cool and handsome? So yeah, I had nothing really to latch on for this movie going in. I didn't read the book. I may have been told some important details about it, but I couldn't remember, so I went in not really expecting much, and I left really disappointed. I was not happy with this movie, and I feel like it's a very messy movie. So The Housemaid stars Sydney Sweeney, who plays this girl named Millie, and she goes to apply for a job to be a housemaid at this house owned by Nina, who has a husband and a baby. And it turns out she really needs this job because she's kind of homeless and she's struggling a lot and barely getting by. She actually lied about what she said to Nina about the job, and you know, she just needs something that she can live in. So she does this interview, not really expecting much, but it turns out she actually does get the job. So she lives her normal life, you know, being a housemaid, doing the cooking, the cleaning, taking care of chores, and then it quickly turns out that Nina is kind of a psycho and a lot to deal with. I think the setup for this premise is pretty decent. It sounds like something you would definitely read in a book. I don't want to throw any shade to the story or the author. It definitely seems like the book is way better, but a spoiler alert, it definitely seems like it is. I guess not really spoiler, but to me it sounded way better in the book. When it comes to these novel to film adaptations, there's a lot of things that they have to get right, and there's a lot of things that they have to cut out. And there are times where they're definitely going to upset people based on what they have to cut out. It's definitely important to get character moments and development and pacing done really well. But yes, the story premise was pretty good. I thought it was very interesting. And going forward, I really can't make any comparisons to the book because when I was done watching it, I got really the Spark Notes versions of what was missed and what really wasn't in the movie. And also, this is a movie, so it's not really fair to compare it to the book as far as its score goes. So I won't bother mentioning it, but like I keep mentioning, it definitely seems like the book was better. So yeah, the story was fine. Now let's acting. Man, Sydney Sweeney is not impressing me at all. Now, apparently, Sydney Sweeney's character, or Millie's character, is supposed to be this dull, boring character. Apparently. And maybe they just hired the perfect actress to play this boring character because that's all I got from Sydney's performances. It was just boringness. I don't even know if that's a word, but I'm gonna say it. I saw moments and glimpses of like emotion and like true character, like very few often times in this movie. Same with the husband character, who has a very important role in this film. It just seems like he comes off as very boring, and I just can't really attach to him at all, especially when you find out like the other part of this movie. The pacing was fine, but it really feels like it was just like moment to moments, like, oh, then this scene happened and this day happened, where they had like one event happen and then the next day like Sydney's in bed and waiting for the next day to happen. There's this groundskeeper character who, and I keep having to say this, but I don't want to make any comparisons to the book, at least not right now. But this groundskeeper character is just in the movie, and he kind of seems like he's just there half the time and not really doing anything. It really seems like he's being this ominous, mysterious person. The movie's just like, oh, I wonder what his whole deal is. It's like you could just obviously tell he knows something that the main character doesn't. Speaking of the writing, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to this. The writing for this movie just made this movie very predictable about what was going to happen. And again, I could go on and on about how the trailers really ruin it for most people, but you could just tell something was not right from the moment Millie's character pulled up into the house. You just knew that there was going to be some creepy shit involved. Throughout Millie being a housemaid for this family, she gets more closer to the dad character, and man, do they not hide the fact that these characters are gonna fuck. Like, almost instantaneously you could tell like, oh yeah, these characters are going to fall in love and then the wife is going to get replaced. You could also tell that Nina's character is setting things up to work in a certain way. I mean, when I watched this, I instantly knew that Nina was probably lying about some things and withholding information. I will say there was one surprise with her turning out to be a certain way. That kind of got me, but that's really just about it. I kind of knew what was going to happen in the rest of this movie. Even in the beginning of the movie, Millie was getting a tour of the house, and it's like, oh, here's where this murder scene is going to happen, and this where this murder weapon's going to get used. They just really don't try to hide anything. Like, nothing is really subtle in this film at all. You could just tell what is going to happen at the end. Almost maybe by the first 30 minutes. So it's a shame that the writing didn't really keep anything a bit of a surprise. Because, you know, there are people like me who don't really know anything about the book. But, I don't know, I guess you could argue that this movie was made for the fans, and I could go into a whole other discussion about that. But I won't. There wasn't really anything as far as, like, camera shots to really talk about, really. The music is kind of just generic and doesn't really have a purpose. There was moments where I thought the music was kind of playing these creepy sounds, and I always like it when movies do this. They play this unique creepy sound that I don't hear, and they had that in this movie, but then like 90% of the film had just pop music by Taylor Swift, and yeah, okay. So, this scene is probably for the adults only, so if you're a child, don't listen. So, yeah, there's a sex scene in the movie, and, man, do they just not care about it at all. It's very untasteful. I could talk also a lot about how sex scenes in movies are kind of just bastardized. I know it's not the most important thing in the world, and in fact, it really has no factor into this movie review, really. I just thought I'd talk about it. But it seems like sex scenes are just in the movies for people to just like, hey, oh, let me go back to that scene and watch it a bunch. But like, it goes into this whole issue where it's like, this is not how real humans, like, do this. This is not how the sex works. Yeah, well, I did like some parts of the music. The music for the majority of the film was just like, yep, pop music. Yep, that's pop music. Let's just play this very generic pop song so people in the audience should know how to feel. I want to toggle back to this writing moment because there was a moment in the film where Nina was like off getting some like tea or something, and like Millie was in like the room serving tea and everything, and like her friends were over, and like they're just like vomiting the plot that we don't know like out in the public. And I guess Nina does pretend not to hear this, but it's just kind of like bad writing because they're not even trying to be subtle. They're just openly talking about lore in front of people. It's like when I hear people talk about Five Nights at Freddy's lore, and I can't help but notice and listen in. They could have done a way better job of like portraying information or relaying that, but they got to do it somehow. You could argue that there is a bit of a meaning here in this film. Sometimes I don't really see it in this, but you can argue that this movie talked a lot about abuse and oppression and classism. I don't really know. I'm just throwing that out there. But watching this, I didn't really get much out of it also besides that. I thought it was just very fine for what it was. I think there's a lot of issues with this movie. With the whole characters, there is a lot to really talk about, and there is like a whole like other thing that happens in this movie that's like the second half of this movie, but it's more like the last 2/5 of the movie, and I don't really want to talk about that because it goes into a lot of things, and I want to keep these somewhat brief. But yeah, I don't want to talk about that much, but overall, The Housemaid is kind of a mess. Now, I was told a lot about what was not in this movie based on the book, and it sounds way more interesting, and I have brought this up now a few times, but apparently there was supposed to be a lot more character development, there was supposed to be a lot more, you know, characteristics in the characters, a lot more, you know, things to know about them. There was supposed to be more slow moments and pacing and build up to certain scenes, but like I also keep mentioning, these things happen when you make a movie out of a book. It's just really hard to do these things successfully. Was it interesting? Yeah, sure. Is the book better? Most likely. So I'm gonna give this movie a 5 out of 10. I just think it just missed the mark on a lot of areas, but didn't do horribly on a lot of other things too. Like, it's not like the worst movie ever. It's still pretty enjoyable, and I think if you've read the books and you just want to see this visualized, and I think it's enjoyable. If I was a massive fan of the book, I can see this movie maybe getting a 6, maybe 6.5. But there is just a lot of issues with this movie, and I definitely think it could have been a lot better. But that's what I think about this movie. What do you guys think? Let me know. Talk about it, leave a comment, and yep, I'll see you in another review. So you mean to tell me there's an Eternity for anything? So the other day I got to see Eternity, made by A24 and directed by David Frayne, and I bet a lot of people don't even know this movie even exists. These are one of these movies where there just not is a lot of marketing behind them, and or because the marketing currently right now is being overtaken by Avatar and SpongeBob. But this movie did come out, an A24 movie, you know, low budget, always gonna have big returns, seems very interesting and a lot of care put into them. You know what to expect from A24. And I thought this one was a pretty decent movie, honestly. Nothing too crazy, nothing too bad. The story is about a couple who is going to this party, and the couple is very elderly, and during this party, the husband dies. Yep, he dies, and he goes to heaven, or at least not yet. He actually goes to this place that's like a waiting room before they get to eternities, and it turns out there is so many eternities that you could go to, and they're themed even, and there's eternities based on a certain thing or a certain place in the world or a certain, like, anything really. It really opened the door up to any possible eternity. And also, apparently anyone could go to any eternity. It's not exclusive to only good people, bad people, evil people, criminals, anyone. So yeah, very interesting plot. So yeah, the main character, he fucking dies. He leaves his wife, but she also eventually dies a week later. And right before she comes there, the main character meets another character named Luke, and he's this bartender who's just there working at the waiting room area for people, and it turns out he's actually waiting on his wife. And then, oh no, it turns out that Larry's the main character who died. But yeah, he died. Larry, it turns out his wife is actually the same wife of Luke's back in the day, over 65 years ago. So now they're in a bit of a situation. They're all three dead and they're wanting to go to their eternity, but Luke and Larry wants to be with their wives. So now the wife has to make a very tough choice. So the movie goes throughout this whole like back and forth, like tug of war kind of storyline where one character needs to prove that they deserve to be in eternity with their wives, and there is strong arguments for both of them. And even thinking about this movie, it's very interesting to think like, oh, who should she go with? You know, it's even funny, like the whole plot of like them being dead, it doesn't even like factor into the movie at all. You're really just thinking about like which person is going to get to go on a very long vacation with their wife. Luke, played by Caitlin Turner, wants to be in eternity with, you know, Joanne, the main character, played by Elizabeth Olsen, and he was married to her 67 years ago, and he died in a war, and tragically, she did move on and marry the new guy, Larry, played by Miles Teller, who has been married to her for 65 years. And yeah, like I mentioned, there's arguments for both of them. I don't really want to go into detail too much. Both guys feel like they're owed their wives, and it really is a tough choice for Joan. We do get to see these CAs, which are like managers for people who get into this eternity waiting room, who has to help them decide on where they want to go, and they get to stay in this like lavish hotel that's not really that crazy good. I wonder if they wanted to like make it seem like a perfect hotel, but really was kind of a shitty one at the same time. But they're helping these people try to get to these eternity, and it's also their job, and you do actually get to learn about these CAs, these managers. One character named Anna, played by Divine Joy Randolph, she was a very interesting character, and you really got to know about her and why she wants to do this job, and I really think she added a lot to the story. I thought she was very entertaining. Had a slight stereotypical like feature about her, but nothing really too crazy. You really stop focusing on that, mainly with her attitude towards the main character Larry when he gets into heaven. The other CA we don't really get to know too much about, but we know he is a high status like CA manager. He really takes his job seriously, played by John Early, named Ryan. He's a very interesting character who has this relationship also with Anna too, and their chemistry is really funny. And in general, this movie has a good amount of like chemistry between all of the characters. It's pretty funny and entertaining. Now, with each character having a valid argument and having like a good thing to show off about themselves, about why they should be with Joan, each character also has flaws. Of course, no one is perfect. Luke wants to live this perfect life and like almost make it too perfect with no issues whatsoever. He's also seems like he's very demanding, as well as he gives off this attitude where he's owed something, and this really doesn't rub Joan the right way. Larry also just wants to be very, you know, the same. He wants to just do what he mainly wants to do, doesn't want to consider what Joan feels, and he also feels like he's owed Joan in a way. And yeah, throughout the movie, you really kind of like pick your battle, like, oh, who should get Joan? And then a decision is made, and then that's really all I want to talk about the film as far as its story goes. I think the movie has a lot of powerful meanings and messages it wants to talk about when it comes to who you should really spend your eternal life with and who you should be happy with. It talks about moving on and changing the way your life is lived and what comes with that and like what that looks like. I probably didn't talk about these parts, but yeah, acting was really well done, especially Elizabeth Olsen's character. I think she did a pretty good job. She has a lot of experience with other films that I've seen her in. I thought the pacing was pretty well done. They did a good amount of time on each arguments, and also this being an indie movie, there really isn't that much in it. There's actually, the cast is really not that big. There are a good amount of characters to know about, but really it's not that big. I don't really remember them having much of a soundtrack at all. At least that was original. And yeah, really, for an A24 movie, this was a pretty decent movie. There definitely is a lot to talk about, and the character moments are really special, and it definitely is kind of emotional at times as well. And I think it's a very sweet, nice movie to just enjoy in the holidays, honestly. This movie didn't do anything to really offend me. It didn't really do anything too much to go, like, beyond, like, being Oscar nomination worthy, I feel like, but it is enjoyable. It's a nice little A24 movie. It's not their best work, but honestly, it's not really that bad at all. So overall, I think I will give this movie a good old 8 out of 10. And I know whenever I talk about movies that are just doing the bare minimum, they get an 8, and that really should warrant a 7, but I think this movie does something a bit more special, and I do think this movie does give audience members like some things to think about and talk about with other people. This movie doesn't really do anything that's very distasteful or very like bad. It really does everything great, but I wanted it obviously to do a lot more. I even thought about an alternate ending for the film. It involves this whole plot line that they talked about that they also really didn't explore that much, where like when you choose your eternity, you can't go back. So that's why some characters are also waiting for their loved ones to come so they can decide to go on an eternity together. And people could go to the wrong eternities and feel like they need to go to another one, but that's not how it works. Once you go to an eternity, you have to stay there, and if you get caught trying to leave your eternity, which is a thing, it's kind of like strange, you could just leave whenever. Also, some eternities are limited, and some are even discontinued and packed. So it seems like these places are like vacation rooms, but yeah, if you happen to like leave and get away, you will get hunted down and sent to the void. And I thought about this ending where, let's say Joan picks a certain someone. I'm not saying that's what happens, but let's just say she picks one person and she's like, no, I want to go back to the other person instead. And she decides like, I'm going to stay with you. And I know what I'm doing is bad, but I came back for you and I want to run away because the other person stayed behind. They decided to run away together into the void, and they decided that their love was so strong that as long as they're together, it doesn't matter where they're at, and even if they're in the void together, they're still going to love each other to the very end because they have each other. And honestly, thinking about that would have been very artsy, and sometimes that's just not what a movie needs to be sometimes. Sometimes a movie just needs to have a nice, sweet, little happy ending. Yeah, maybe my version of the ending was like too much, but I don't know, that's what I would have done, but that doesn't really factor into how I feel about the movie that I saw. It's still really enjoyable. Still a lot to talk about. Pretty funny, pretty entertaining, not bad. Anyone could really watch it, and it's a really good time. So yeah, 8 out of 10. What do you guys think about Eternity? And yeah, let me know. Leave a comment, and then I will see you in another review. I'm not dead, you're dead. That's all I got, I'm sorry. A while ago, I got to see Die My Love with Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson, produced by Mubi and directed by Lynn Ramsey. It's actually been a while since I saw this movie, but I do remember a good amount of things about it. The story, like any other story, is about two lovers who move into this house that they inherited, and they are crazy for each other, like absolutely crazy. Like straight up, they just start getting into sex. Like a lot of it. They start playing around, listening to rock music, partying really hard, and going crazy, going absolutely nuts. Like, you absolutely do not see Robert Pattinson and Jennifer Lawrence in this character. Like, they turn into absolute freaks. But I guess that just shows how good of a performance they did. So these two lovers are in this house, and they're having a lot of fun, and then eventually they slip up a little and have a child. So that's introduced into this whole plot line, and I want to say that's where things start slowly making a turn, because eventually throughout the film, the two couples, their relationship gets very toxic, and I mean extremely toxic. So obviously these couple, they love each other, they want to do extreme things, they want to have fun, party hard, but as time keeps going, that just cannot be the reality of their relationship. They can't really keep doing that. They have a child now, and Robert Pattinson's character, Jackson, he has to work, and he can't always be home. and Jennifer's character Grace is always home, kind of like a stay-at-home mom. And while Jackson is out at work, Grace's character is trying to like still keep up that energy as if she was still young and ready to party hard. Like she's still taking care of her child and eventually a dog that gets brought into the relationship. But she does start to fantasize about wanting to go do more crazy things, like she sees this horse in the wild and she wants to be like the horse. At least I'm assuming that's what they were trying to get at with the whole connection. She also fantasizes about this biker that drives by sometimes, and she just fantasizes about cheating and going and sleeping with him. Now, of course, it may seem like Jennifer's character is pretty at fault here, but that's not to say Jackson's character is also at fault. He doesn't really do a good job of communicating and expressing what he wants in a relationship. He really just sets this whole like imaginary like relationship up as if everything is still fine and dandy, but like he doesn't really come to terms with Grace and gets real with her. In fact, he also does things without her permission. Grace is here at home, always like feeling trapped inside, and she's very visibly upset about things, and she also expresses this to Jackson, and he doesn't do anything about it. And like I mentioned, he just keeps continuing to do what he wants to do because he thinks he's in the right. So both of these characters are crazy, and they're both making a lot of bad mistakes, and it almost even seems like they're not meant for each other. But yeah, I don't want to say too much more about what happens throughout the story because it gets absolutely batshit crazy. I thought the pacing was really well done. You definitely feel this build-up that's happening throughout the movie where it's like, these characters are going to kill each other, like, really, no joke. I feel like you can also kind of understand these characters and where they're coming from. Like, you do get to see their point of view, but you also will get to see like, hey man, you're kind of in the wrong here. Again, that's for both people in this relationship. There is this plot line with their families that's involved throughout the movie, and they also don't help with like settling things and making things right. They kind of just enable the other party, if not do the opposite effect on themselves. And yeah, it really should have just been a situation where Jackson and Grace should have just worked things out and not involved their family. Acting was really well done, like I said earlier. Every character, from what I remember, did a pretty great job, very believable. Robert and Jennifer are pretty much the start of this show, and Lakeith Stanfield is also in this movie. He's been in a few ones actually recently, and he makes a noticeable appearance, and I think his character was done pretty well for what it was supposed to be. Jackson's mom is also pretty important in this story, and it pretty much represents like her relationship and how it's kind of like fucked, and she can't help but think like the same thing is also going to happen with her. There's a lot of symbolism in this movie, especially with the dog, and towards the end of the movie there's this symbolism with the whole cake and even the baby. Like I feel like, without talking too much about it because there really is so much to talk about, you could definitely point their fingers and be like, oh, that's what that means. I think they did that really well with this movie. It really helped understand like how characters were feeling about certain things. And of course they even show it because, like I mentioned, Grace's behavior becomes very erratic and she becomes even more psycho, and Jackson is just not helping at all in the situation, not doing anything to like calm her and be with her. This movie I feel like is a great movie to watch if you want to know what to do to fuck up a relationship. I will say, I'm not saying that I'm giving the best advice ever, but this movie definitely like was a lot of things like, yep, I would definitely not be doing that. And I feel like a lot of people watching this would also hopefully learn that, like picking up on these things and not really rushing into certain relationships so soon, especially that could involve so many other things. I remember the music being very enjoyable. I don't really remember too much, but I do remember just liking it. I have a note here about that, so that's really all I can say. It's a nice cinematography here and camera shots there. Again, nothing to really go on about. It has been a while since I've seen it. There is this part in the movie where they really trick you on like what's happening in the real timeline. It's like, oh, that didn't really happen. And I also think the way this movie also ended was very, metaphorical and symbolic of like how this character is feeling. And of course, I don't want to say what happens, of course, but I think it's a very interesting ending, and I don't think a lot of people might like it as much and may not understand it, but I really did like how this movie ended, and I really do appreciate it. I remember they had a good amount of like shots that were very colorful, like they did really good job with lighting and colors, all that. Nothing really else to talk about there. But yeah, overall this movie was pretty enjoyable, and I thought it was very well done, honestly. It's one of those movies where you just kind of have to know that it's coming out, but it really was enjoyable, and I really liked it. So yeah, if you really want to see a good movie that's very crazy and you want to see some good performances by Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson, definitely watch this movie. I'm going to give it a good old 8 out of 10. I thought it was really great, and I really wouldn't mind watching it again, honestly. Yeah, that's what I think about this movie. What do you guys think? Let me know. Leave a comment. And yeah, I will see you in another review.